Trillion. Once you know, you can never go back to merely believing. Mark Kimmel. What if you knew you were not alone? What if you found out the universe was both friendly and organized? What if you discovered you did make a difference? What if you were asked to lead away? Ryan Drake, a successful entrepreneur, learns that the answers to these questions are as real as anything he's ever experienced in business. His story begins in a remote corner of the Navajo Reservation, and through seeming coincidences, he discovers that his view of this world, of the cosmos, was narrow, to say the least. Ryan's ultimate test takes place when those who oppose this larger truth discover him and his off-planet friends. It becomes a race to see if Ryan and his friends can convince the right people before they are silenced. Yet this inspirational adventure is not just a journey through one's imagination. It helps readers discover a new paradigm on how to view the universe, and the reason they are here. Trillion is based on first-hand experiences, ideas from philosophy and psychology, to medicine, science, and cosmology have been incorporated into this important work. Look for the sequel to Trillion. Bridget T.S. Herbalist, Nutritional Consultant, Raw Chef 303, Thefatu, 4967 www.bridgetimas.com. Email, bridget@indra.com. Classes, consultations, formulations. 1919 D. 19th Street, Boulder, at Florida 80302. Trillion. Mark Kimmel. Paradigm Books, Boulder, Colorado. Once you know, you can never go back to merely believing. Trillion. Printed in the United States of America. This novel is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, institutions, agencies, and incidents either are the product of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, events, or locales is entirely coincidental. www.paradigmbooks.biz. Library of Congress. Cataloging and publication data. Kimmel, Mark. Trillion. Mark Kimmel. First edition. PCM ISBN number 09720151. 081. Metaphysics. Fiction 2. Extraterrestrials. Fiction 3. Conspiracy. Fiction 4. Cosmology. Fiction I. Title first printing June 2002. Paradigm Books. P.O. Box 18237 Boulder, CO 80308 1237. Copyright sign 2002 by Mark Kimmel. All rights reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced in any form or by any electronic or mechanical means, including information storage and retrieval systems, without permission in writing from the publisher, except by a reviewer, who may quote brief passages in a review. For Heidi, who encourages me to be myself, for Amber, who insists on daily hikes, and for me, Celestialis. This planet is an imperative in their friendly, organized universe. It is time for its people to grow up and take their rightful place in the cosmos. SOAME, Tundrone, OEEPNSP Sarias Wusasi Kodat, Iatlesha Sopin CFVCRS. Scene 7, Ong. Most people simply cope with what life hands them, and do not act as if there is more to the universe than their existence on this sphere. Peter Jones. One immediate. Ryan Drake shouted to the wind, "You could have killed us both. He pounded the steering wheel and fought the temptation to pursue the driver of the van. Jerk. After swerving to avoid the oncoming vehicle, his dusty Jeep rested in sagebrush beside the narrow dirt road. The emblem on the van's side marked it as a United States government vehicle. In his rearview mirror, Ryan watched it retreat in a cloud of dust. After 100 yards, it turned and headed for the main highway. Ryan set his jaw and tasted grit. He pulled his white Jeep Grand Cherokee back onto the road and proceeded toward the sign, Harmony Center. He was not about to allow some minor incident to interfere with his visit. He was much more interested in the strange facility in this remote corner of the Navajo reservation. Mark Kimmel Harmony Center appeared to consist of two traditional-looking Navajo hogans and a huge glass and aluminum geodesic dome, a glistening white blister on the desert's ruddy skin. The dome had to be over 150 feet at its base. The larger hogan was a clay-red hemisphere about 30 feet across with a door facing the parking area. The other hogan was the same height and color but much smaller in diameter. It reminded him of an inverted ice cream cone. I thought a chimney at its peak, but no visible door. Ryan had wondered about these unusual structures as he had driven past them on his way to Benstig. A mile or two further down the road, they seemed somehow out of place. Ben had told him they sat atop an extensive underground facility. Except for the wind-blown dust that covered everything in this part of Arizona, their grounds were immaculate. None of the clutter typical of Navajo settlements. A small beat-up trailer was parked near the dome. To the east, Fortress Mesa towered 2,000 feet above. Its cap arc, a sheer 300 feet of weathered sandstone, was silhouetted against a cloudless sky. It dwarfed the two terracotta 10. Most of the other vehicles in the parking area were pickups with Arizona license plates. His Jeep's plates were the green and white of Colorado. Ryan pulled in next to a light green sedan at the far end of the row. The lettering on the side of this vehicle, beneath the United States government seal, read Immigration and Naturalization Service. While he was expected, out in the desert it was polite to give people little notice before banging on their door. He stretched his arms and flexed his hands. After working for 10 days in the hard ground at Bensotzi's archaeological excavation, he was a different person. Back home, he would already have rung the doorbell a second time. Beehives and the sparkling dome. He studied the imposing facade and wondered if a climbing route existed and what he might find on the mesa's summit. To Ryan Drake's right, the sun reflected off a silver water tank and the 10-foot satellite dish. Further right, photovoltaic arrays baked in the sun. Harmony was 2 miles from the nearest paved road, 20 miles from the nearest town, Kayenta. There was little telephone or electrical service on the reservation, none here. These high-tech utilities seemed out of place in the undeveloped landscape. Through dark lenses, he surveyed his worn jeans and hiking boots. His cleanest shirt covered a freshly showered body. His softened hands showed the results of digging for artifacts in the dry ground of the high desert. Scrapes and blisters had replaced his neat manicure. The outside temperature was probably in the mid-70s. Thank God he was here in October. This place could be an inferno in July. Ryan tilted his head left and scratched his salt and pepper stubble. It was testimony to the fact that he enjoyed getting grubby. part of his relaxation process. Only 10 days old, it appeared to have grown for 3 weeks. His beard had appeared early in his teen years, dark and full. His senior year of college he had sported a luxuriant full growth. He would remove it when he returned for work. A successful CEO could get away with a lot, but not being unshaven. He glanced at the avocet strapped to his wrist. 12:05 p.m. 05 for 10 feet. The electronic watch altimeter was a prized possession that he had kept functioning for over 10 years. He pushed a button on its side. The 14th of October. He was about to get out of his jeep when the door of the largest Hogan banged open and 2 people emerged. A dark 11 trillion. Mark Kimmel, where are they? There are no others. But you have seen all. Ryan was tempted to go to Sarah's aid, but hesitated. He did not know the lithe woman that well and had never seen the man before. The man grabbed her arm. I know you're lying. With no apparent action on Sarah's part, the swarthy man stopped in mid-sentence. His hand fell to his side. He turned and walked to the light green sedan, did not look around, and paid no attention to Ryan. As it zipped from the parking lot, the sedan spewed gravel against the rear of Ryan's jeep. Since the terrorist attacks on U.S. soil, the INSS had shifted its priorities toward defending the country's borders, ensuring that no new terrorists entered. What did an INSS agent want here in the middle of the Navajo reservation, hundreds of miles from the Mexican border? Ryan stepped out of his jeep, grabbed his hat as the breeze lifted it from his head, and walked towards Sarah. Bright sun highlighted the blonde hair cascading onto her slim shoulders. She reminded him of a gold-crowned princess from a fairy tale. At their 2 previous meetings, she had hidden this splendor under a western hat. He clasped her cool outstretched hand. Are you all right? 12-plexioned man and a slim blonde woman who towered over him. In his black outfit, the man reminded him of a cabrero. She was more like a marathon runner, thin but healthy, and she was young, at least 10 years younger than himself. Ryan could barely hear Sarah Smith's words as she asked, "What else can I? You're gonna be so sorry, you bitch." The man shouted and slammed on his black western hat. He asked, sorry, you see, so unlike dark-haired Navajo women, yet Sarah Smith spoke as if she had learned English here on the reservation. He wanted to inquire more, but decided he would learn about it when she was ready. As they strolled toward the larger Hogan, Sarah's stride matched his. She moved like a cougar drifting across an open space. Her large mirrored lenses reflected the landscape. Ryan had first met her last Friday when she wandered into their camp. Out for morning hike, she explained. She sipped coffee with them and told Ryan about Harmony Center. 1.5 miles that way, she pointed northwest. You pass it and way to excavation. The exchange had been friendly, unaffected. When they went to work, the slender woman climbed down into the trench to look at the layer that the team was working. Ryan explained pre-Columbian culture, the significance of Ben Sotzi's archaeological dig, how they had unearthed a stratum that Ben believed predated the Anasazi. The attractive woman's tactful manner and genuine curiosity impressed him. In his experience, most beautiful women were aloof, self-involved. Sarah had shown up again on Monday in an ankle-length flowered dress that reminded Ryan of an old John Wayne movie. The garment did not hang quite right on her slim frame. As before, She kept her dark glasses and hat on during her entire visit. From a large cardboard box, she had supplied fried chicken, bean salad, tortillas, and cold drinks. Tasty, but the caraway seeds on the chicken and in the bean salad were a bit much. As they ate, she had asked Ryan about his work. He explained about environmental monitoring equipment and small company organizations. She seemed to grasp his comments about business, but appeared dismayed at this discourse on electronics. She asked 13 trillion. Mark Kimmel. Sarah held the door to the larger Hogan and Ryan stepped inside. He removed his dark glasses and placed them in his shirt pocket. As his eyes adjusted to the dim interior, he was surprised to see that the Hogan was unfurnished. There was only a spotless floor of southwestern tile. The interior side was stucco but not decorated. 2 small windows provided light. They walked 10 feet toward the back and down green carpeted steps. Each stair, wide enough for 3 people, was lit from the side. The long staircase descended to a landing dominated by massive oak doors. T come to Harmony a year ago. She wore a western shirt with pearl snaps, a silver belt buckle, no turquoise. Her clothes, clean and pressed, showed no signs of wear, but her boots were dusty, like everything else in this desert. He was about to inquire where she had lived before coming to Harmony, but he stumbled on the bottom stair and caught himself. Damn, he got nervous around beautiful women, especially Nordic blondes. He noted that she wore no wedding ring. She ignored his embarrassment and continued, "Our facility below ground." To avoid hot summer, Ryan hurried to open the tall, heavy door. As he held it for her, he glimpsed a spacious room with a high ceiling and polished tile. At its center was a long table with a dozen Southwest 14 hem. Ife was happy and gave him a stack of papers. She said they described Harmony's vision. He glanced at the strange words, but did not probe further. He was interested in her, not printed material. She had a gentle way about her that he had seldom encountered. Before she departed, she invited him to lunch, to see facility and meet rest of my people. He had watched as she walked to her pickup and drove down the dirt road to Harmony Center. That was 2 days ago. Chairs, heavy wood and leather. At one end, bright orange napkins, plates, silverware and glasses were arranged for a meal. The smell of cooking greeted him. He removed his dusty hat and smoothed disher. In contrast to the dessert above, the room was almost cold. The spacious dining area with its high ceiling resembled that of an elegant hotel. Green landscapes and winter scenes decorated the walls. The overall effect of the recessed lighting was subdued. He noted 2 men at a low table in the far left corner. As they rose, Sarah motioned toward the white-haired one. That is Dr. Victor Adamson, founder of Harmony Center. He worked with Navajos to construct buildings. A Barrowman in his mid-60s strode toward them. Erect posture, broad shoulders, like a soldier in review but without the stiffness. He wore blue jeans and a plaid shirt. The other man followed behind. "Hello, Ryan." Dr. Adamson greeted him like an old friend. His full head of white hair, receding from a high forehead, AC-scented his blue eyes. Dr. Adamson did not offer the customary handshake, but put a husky arm around Ryan's shoulder. "Welcome." The word resonated as if echoing from a canyon. Cheeks furrowed at the ends of his broad smile. neat rows of white teeth. His friendliness did not disturb Ryan. He had a distinct feeling he had met the white-haired man before. "This is Peter Jones." Sarah smiled and indicated the second man who had joined the group. Peter was 6 inches shorter than Ryan, had narrow shoulders, and his western outfit hung from his frame as if it were a size too large. Except for bushy black eyebrows that capped squinting eyes, his head displayed no trace of hair. He looked older than Sarah, about 50, about Ryan's age. In his left hand, he held a maroon book. 15 trillion. "Mark Kimmel, do you have a family?" Peter Jones asked. "They've 2 grown children," Ryan replied. "And you are divorced?" Dr. Adamson said in a forthright and deliberate tone. His words were not hurried as Peter's had been. Ryan glanced at the white-haired man. "Why, yes. How did you know?" His instinct told him that this man knew a lot about him, a lot more than he was letting on. "Where had he met him?" 16. Peter mumbled, hello," and bobbed his head when Ryan grasped his hand. His thin smile and rigid demeanor reminded Ryan of a college professor. Something about Peter's stiffness made Ryan think that the bald man struggled to merely stand. His eyes had a cloudy look about them. "Understand you're staying with Ben Southsea. I know him through his cousin, Cody," Dr. Adamson said. "Several members of that family have been most helpful." His words were like those of a Midwestern native, but each had a deep resonance. It required 5 years of discussion just to convince the Navajos that our facility would not disturb its neighbors. His chuckle reverberated. "They leased this piece of land to us for 49 years. There are no neighbors," Peter Jones said. "This is a bit off the beaten path," Ryan said. "Guess that's why you like it out here. Tell us about yourself." Peter rattled off the words as if were happy to finish with them. His face contorted as he spoke, as if it was expelling the words from a blowhole. "All right," Ryan said. "I live near Boulder, in Colorado. I run a company there. We manufacture instrumentation that measures air and water pollutants. We also operate a system that collects data from locations around the world, and we supply the results to government agencies and others." Dr. Adamson smiled and said, "Please, before you talk more, sit down to some food." His rumble commanded attention and they moved toward a table. Sarah took the seat at the end of the table and motioned Ryan to the place on her right. Peter sat down directly across from him. "They've something out you must attend," Dr. Adamson said to Ryan. "Enjoy your lunch." Ryan glanced at Sarah. When he looked back, Dr. Adamson had disappeared, leaving the 3 of them alone in the room. Ryan had not heard any retreating footsteps or the closing of the door. In a few moments, Navajos came through a side door with heaping plates of salad, mixed greens with tomato and cucumber slices. They passed around corn tortillas, broiled chicken, 2 kinds of salad dressing, sliced melon and orange quarters. Pitchers of iced tea and water were already on the table. Ryan reached for the dish of salsa and spooned a little onto his plate. As a student at Arizona State University, one of the first things he had learned to enjoy was the food of the Southwest. When Sarah picked up her fork, Ryan turned to her and politely inquired, "Where did you live before coming here?" She froze, glanced at Ryan, and turned to Peter, as if were an actor given his cue. Peter blurted out, Your world is in danger." He looked at Ryan as if he expected a response. Ryan leaned back and gauged the stuttering man. "I guess I can agree with that," he said at length. "This world can be a dangerous place. There are some back alleys I won't go in at night. Your world is sting. Oh, now I get it. You're referring to the environment. The environment ison. There are others, such as men from this country scheme to subjugate this planet. The 7 trillion. Mark Kimmel much I scared about this country." Then Ryan thought again. All Peter had tried to do was express a few different ideas. Wasn't that why he'd come to the desert? He realized that he had not really listened to what Peter had said. Normally he was able to appreciate the other party's point of view. Usually he relished playing it back to them and forcing them to see both sides. Somehow Peter was different. After the exchange, the conversation wandered pleasantly. He told Sarah how he'd scaled the Eiger at 19, and about hiking in Nepal and New Zealand. Although Sarah admitted to some athletic success in her 18, Peter Jones's words came at Ryan like the firing of a machine gun. The bald man's right hand pressed his jaw as if urging his mouth to cooperate with his brain. "I doubt that. The United States has never been known as an aggressor," Ryan said. "This country is the greatest democracy in the world. Hey, we found something to agree about. America is a great country." Ryan took a bite off the chicken and grimaced. Caraway again. He spotted the small black seeds. What was caraway doing in Southwest chicken? The flavor clashed with the spicy salsa he had spooned onto it. Most people simply cope with what life hands them, and do not act as if there is more to the universe. Peter paused to catch his breath. Calmer than their existence on this sphere. It was apparent that he was reciting words he had memorized. Ryan started to say something but returned to his plate instead. This stuttering invalid did not understand how the real world worked. But how could he? Bottled up on a remote Indian reservation, Peter talked like a revolutionary from some third world country. Was that why the Inns was interested in harmony? Youth. She emphasized that she was just learning about the dessert. When she was not eating, Sarah played with the delicate metal lion, 3 concentric circles honed from gold and blue stone, on a thin gold chain. Ryan was acutely aware of her physical presence. Peter said nothing more, although he seemed to listen with great interest. The bald man traced notes on a small pad that he kept positioned on top of his book. His eating was slow and awkward. As they munched on the melon and oranges, Sarah asked, "Have you heard of woman they found yesterday?" One of Ben's crew spotted her, stumbling alongside the highway. He took her to the clinic in Kayenta. "Is there any news?" "She died this morning," Sarah said. Misty grey eyes held his attention, an adult version of a big-eyed doll. "They say it was from exposure, and from a beating. How terrible. Wandering in this desert, hurt, all alone." She was not an Navajo. With her right hand, Sarah brushed strands of hair behind her ear. "The Immigration and Naturalization Service thinks she was from Mexico and that she was in the country illegally. That man, who left as you arrived, is Raul Viejo. He is with the Inns. He interviewed me again and again." "What about the guy in the van?" Ryan had not forgotten how the larger vehicle had raced down the center of the narrow road, its driver oblivious to his white Jeep. "He is Luis Litchfield from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. What do they want with you?" "They believe we were harboring the woman from Mexico," Sarah spoke with a mildness that reminded him of Mrs. Martin, who had taught him 4th grade. In the world of business, one did not encounter many gentle ladies. Ryan was sure he would hear more about that woman. News travel at first in this trillion. Mark Kimmel barren region. 3 years in construction. Pretty fancy for missionaries. Sarah smiled. We're revelators. We unveil truth. Missionaries try to convince people what they believe. Down a short hall, she opened double doors into a large room with thousands of books. This is the library. Her voice fell to a whisper as they stood in the doorway. A young Navajo woman sat at a desk lost in her reading. It is open to all. Ryan approached the floor-to-ceiling shelves. The books were filled by author, The World as is Eat by Einstein, and The Road Less Traveled by Peck. Plato's Republic, Reauthoring Lives by White. Racks of current magazines and newspapers line one entire wall. The Economist, Newsweek, Scientific American, New York Times. Seats were arranged for viewing the television. 3 racks of videos. He noted a few of the titles. Casablanca, The 20. Would you like to see our facility? Sarah asked when they finished eating. Ryan nodded and she pointed him to a side door. They walked down a short hall, white walls and ceiling, light linoleum. The tall ceiling and broad hallway give no indication they were underground. An unusual scent replaced the smells of lunch, almost medicinal, not altogether unpleasant. We're at the hub, Sarah announced after a dozen steps. Hallways angled off in several directions, directly under the dome. Our 5 buildings can be entered from here. Like the spokes of a wheel, you hide the size of your facility well. He calculated the expense involved in building such a place in this remote niche of the Four Corners. Everything was spotless, everything looked new. Graduate, National Geographic, the story of English. With this much print and video around, why didn't Sarah speak like an American? He glanced at a rack of electronics. A VCR sat on top of a highly polished metal cube with unusual pentagonal knobs and rounded sides and corners. Lots of equipment for just receiving television signals. If Brock, the technical genius from his company, were here, he could probably explain it. They returned to the hub and went down a different hall. They passed a glass door. Laboratory. Please keep closed. He peered into the lighted room. Microscopes and glassware covered a long white workbench. We work on environmental contaminants. Ryan saw his reflection in the glass of the door. He noted the incline of his head and centered it. His habit of tilting his head to one side or the other, examining both sides of every issue, had started young. His Irish mother had insisted on his name, Ryan, to balance out the English surname contributed by his father. To remind you of your glorious Gaelic heritage, she often said, and told him stories of her family and their immigration from Ireland to America in 1916. Like the inhabitants of their respective ancestral islands, his parents had disagreed about many things. Arguments about child-rearing, politics and racial matters never ceased. Both parents had sought his support. Now he bifurcated everything. Without further comment, Sarah ushered Ryan back to the hub and down another hall with more light linoleum. She opened large, fireproof doors. Ryan surveyed electrical distribution equipment, a bank of batteries, and a large furnace and fans for moving air about the underground complex. Air filtration system, she said. He nodded his understanding. Why was she intent on show 24 trillion? Mark Kimmel Ryan declined. They returned to the hub and Sarah led him down a broad hall with light blue carpeting. They passed several open doors, lights on. Ryan paused long enough to see that each of the suites contained a desk, queen bed, and bathroom. 2 looked occupied. Nice accommodations for the reservation. An underground Holiday Inn, adequate but not showy. At the end of the hall, Sarah opened a door into a room lit only with a shaded lamp. Peter sat next to the bed on which a grey-skinned woman lay. She appeared to sleep. The unusual smell was particularly strong in the room. "That is Amelia," Sarah said, as she gently shut the door. "We do not expect her to be with us long." "I'm sorry." Sarah held up her hand and said, "We will rejoice when she begins the next stage of her journey." Others stayed here, except 22 eyeing him every room in this complex. And what was Peter trying to prove with that debate at lunch? From their discussions at Bensdig, Sarah knew he was a businessman, knew he was committed to making things happen within his country's economic system. Maybe she just didn't get it. Maybe she was some kind of a radical nut. Sure, she was attractive, but was it even possible to have a personal conversation with her? The next door opened into an exercise room, well equipped with hand weights, machines and a treadmill. For the last 10 days, he had substituted squatting and digging for his normal routine at the club. He checked the settings on the leg extension machine. Somebody was in pretty good shape. A whirlpool and massage table lined one side of the room. Next to the workout room was a staircase. White tile, white walls. These led to rear door and high-temperature incinerator. Sarah said, "It is small Hogan. Would you like to see?" For Amelia, Peter, and me, they're gone. As they strolled back to the hub, Sarah's right hand rested on her medallion. In silence they climbed tiled stairs. The image of Amelia stayed with him. There was something strange about her. He had visited sick people, been in hospitals, but he had never seen the peculiar skin coloring. At the top, they emerged into the bright light of the geodesic dome and a botanical garden. At its center, tall ponderosa and Pythian pines nestled among juniper and sagebrush. A small stream meandered about the display, creating a moat next to the graveled path. Cottonwood trees and willows grew next to the running water. It was as if Somian had brought together alp plants native to the southwest and created a controlled environment for them. Sarah put on dark glasses. Ryan donned his weathered hat. "We study plants and teach Navajo agricultural techniques." "What kind of tree is that?" he asked. He pointed to a clump of squat trees that seemed out of place. Sarah gestured to Navajo, whom she introduced as George Tomichi, the man who lived in the trailer near the dome. "An Australian tea tree," he said, "Leptospermum." He pulled a leaf and handed it to Ryan. "We make lotion from it," Sarah said. "It is the only non-native species in this dome." The leaf's medicinal odor was that which permeated the lower rooms. They strolled around the periphery of the dome. Raised wooden beds contained a variety of plants. A black-haired woman worked at planting sprouts in cinder desert soil. 2 Navajo men and 3 women looked on. They exited at the far edge of the dome, a multiple-door entry. Sarah extended her hand. "Perhaps we will talk more." Something about the way he spoke and moved made Ryan eager to 23 trillion. Mark Kimmel continued their conversation 24 as he drove back to Ben Sotsi's dig. Ryan thought about the visit he just had. That underground facility with its many rooms was unique, but he had seen nothing that would lead the Inns to believe the Mexican woman had lived there. Sarah Smith was the most interesting woman he had met in years, maybe ever. He knew their lunch was somehow important to his future, but he couldn't say why. He just felt it. He'd had these premonitions before, and in each case they had proven unimaginably accurate in retrospect. He'd like to know her better, a lot better. But Peter Jones and she seemed wound up in their own little retreat, far from his world. He resigned himself to going home to Boulder in a few days and, in the likelihood, forgetting about her. The white man views land for its money value. We Indians have a spiritual tie with the earth, a reverence for it that whites don't share and can hardly understand. It pierced to Ben Sotsi wore Navajo working garb, black jeans, a plaid western shirt, and a black, broad-brimmed hat with a silver band. His braid spoke of his attachment to the traditional ways of his people. The notebook and pen in his shirt pocket pointed to his training as an archaeologist. Ryan Drake and the Navajo had become friends as undergrads at Arizona State University. They had stayed in touch and seen each other several times over the intervening 30 years. A month ago, Ben had called Ryan, told him about his new excavation, and insisted he come visit. At the time, Ryan thought it unusual, out of character for Ben to issue such an impulsive invitation. Still, the more he thought about it, the better the chance to spend time in the desert sounded. He told Ben he would come as soon as his divorce proceedings were final and set about to make a hole in his business schedule. 25. Mark Kimmel. Each morning the battery and propane-powered coffee maker had provided them with exquisite latte, one of Ryan's fetishes. But the machine never complied with his desires without adjustment. Fiddling with mechanical devices was his least favorite thing to do. It always irritated him. He had installed an automated espresso machine at the office. There he had people to service it. He closed the back and said, "What did you ask me? Your passion for the land. When did you lose it?" Ben asked. "The ride rake I remember from college wanted to save the world. I remember some demonstrations and a jail cell. Yeah, remember." Ryan paused to pour milk into a cup of Kona and started it steaming. "2 companies ago," he said, "after I made $1 million, you have strayed from the lessons of my family's Hoganoli. They still fear. What opportunities to speak out. Yeah, but I don't do that anymore." "Why?" Ben asked as Ryan handed him a steaming cup. 26. This morning they had been reminiscing about their perpetual struggle to get out of bed and get to Anthropology 209 at 8:05 a.m. with Dr. Whitaker. The feisty young professor was famous for springing pop quizzes. It seemed like every time there was a late-night protest meeting, the next morning Whitaker sprang a quiz. It was funny now. "So, Rye, when did you lose it?" the Navajo asked. "Lose what?" Ryan Drake went to the espresso machine at the end of the folding camp table. "Damn!" he shouted at the open back of the machine. Looking up, he said to Ben, "When they sold me this thing, they didn't tell me about all the adjustments. Too busy. But you always seem to know about the future, how the planet was in danger. Have you lost the two now?" "I just focus on business. The harmony people talk about the bigger picture. Yeah, but they're unrealistic." Ryan pointed to the papers on the table. He had arisen earlier and read a few of the pages. "Hey, I'm doing my part. Sanitas is building instrumentation to measure pollutants in parts per trillion. We've got contracts with state, federal and international agencies. Our global watch-sized TEM gives us a worldwide presence. That's what it's all about. Small steps to make things better. Navajo honor their teachings." Ben sipped his latte. His dark eyes observed his old friend. Ben and Ryan had talked about the people down the road after Sarah had visited that first time. Ben said that he had used their library and gotten to know them fairly well. "That Sarah has a way about her," Ben said. "She is very pretty." Ryan thought of yesterday's lunch and the sun on Sarah's hair. "Too skinny. Not for me. A white man's woman." The Navajo laughed and reached across to poke Ryan's shoulder. Ryan had been at Ben Sotsi's dig 11 days. Ben's Navajo crew had worked it since April. The old dirt road to the archaeological excavation, 2 ruts in some places, wound its way southeast from Arizona Highway 59, past Harmony Center, and ended at an abandoned mine, a mile beyond their camp. Ben had parked his green and white trailer on flat ground not far off the road. The other necessities of the camp, including a blue portable toilet, rested in a slight depression. A nearby tent housed the implements of the dig and the boxes of unearthed artifacts. The 9 trillion. Mark Kimmel Ryan used a trowel to remove a piece of bone. After he dusted it, he labeled it and placed it in a box for later study. He returned with a brush and swept away another layer of dust. Working desert soil that had been compacted over the last 1,000 years was strenuous and tedious, unusual work for the CEO of a technology company. Ryan could not think of any of his contemporaries who would be interested. They were more at home on a golf course or behind the tiller of a sailboat. For the first time in many years, Ryan Drake was not using his special talent to predict where things, personal or business, were headed. Ordinarily he would be thinking about some project or meeting, having planned his schedule months in advance. This time, before he left for the desert, he'd been careful to set only a few appointments. His quarterly board meeting of the Colorado 28 actual excavation site was on a knoll, 50 yards away. Ryan stood and looked west. Across the valley, Black Mesa dominated the western horizon. Its dark rim was 3,500 feet higher than the paved road that ran south from Kayenta. The mesa derived its name from the Pythian trees on its higher slopes. Their dark green stood in sharp contrast to the encircling pale desert. Behind this tranquil facade, the gigantic Peabody mine, a major source of revenue for the Navajo Nation, extracted coal from the top of Black Mesa. The road to that extensive complex was 40 miles to the northwest, off US 160. When the Navajo crew arrived, Ryan and Ben walked to the excavation with them. Ben's crew had made a deep trench with steps to reach the stratum of interest. Twine and labels marked important aspects of the excavation. Another archaeologist had explored this site 70 years before, but Ben had convinced Tasu and the Navajo authorities to allow him to undertake a second dig. In February he had received a grant and, 2 months ago, uncovered the unexplored zone. Conservation Commission, his own board meeting for Sanitas, the publicity event which Sam Wellborn had insisted upon, and his meeting with Nick and Nick's father. not much compared to his normally hectic routine. Now, rather than working to project and synthesize, he saw his future as a blank sheet of paper on which he was preparing to draw a fresh picture. Rye, you need to stop. Ben peered down into evening shadows that blanketed the trench. Just a little longer. Ryan had worked this area the entire day. At this late hour he concentrated on what appeared to be a sculpted stone. The others have already left, the archaeologist said. Ben had recruited Navajos from the area around Kayenta. They went home each evening to their families. Ben slept at the excavation, keeping watch on the tools and valuable artifacts. Ben had offered to share his cramped trailer, but Ryan had declined, arguing that the weather was perfect and he rarely got the chance to sleep under the stars. He had found a clear spot among the sagebrush, and stretched out his sleeping bag and air mat dress. Now, I said goodbye, I'm ready to eat. Ben stepped down to where Ryan chipped away at the hard earth. There, that does it. Ryan nudged the dusty stone from its resting place and lifted it into the evening light. Isn't it a boat? He handed the heavy object to Ben. "TD's wonderful," the archaeologist exclaimed. "The head of a hunting club. See where the handle was attached, and the chisel marks." As the project leader examined the smoothed stone with his 4-inch magnifying glass, Ryan headed for a shower. The water from the 5-gallon water jug was the perfect Trillion. Mark Kimmel. Shaking off these thoughts, Ryan stretched his arms toward Black Mesa. The final rays of the setting sun filtered through the trees on its ridge like light through the teeth of a great whale. One of the incredible benefits of showering like this was standing stark nude before the world. After another moment of indulgence, he turned his ivory butt to the sunset and rinsed off. By the time Ryan dressed, Ben had steaks on the charcoal grill. "A little celebration," the Navajo announced. "These artifacts we're discovering point to the ancestors of the Anasazi." Ryan toasted him with a bourbon and water. Ben drank a Coke. As the sun slid behind Black Mesa, the temperature dropped 15 degrees. They sat at the camp table and ate T-bone steak, 30 temperature. He doused his head and let a little of the warm fluid flow over his body. 1 or 2 scrapes, but overall his days in the desert had only firmed up his already fit body. His farmer's tan had disappeared under the Arizona sun. Lathering his torso reminded him how long it had been since he had been with a woman. There had been 2 brief affairs since his separation from Vicky 18 months ago. Neither of them had been satisfying. The memory of finding his wife in bed with another man made him angry all over again. He glanced at the scar on the knuckle of his right hand and remembered hitting the guy hard enough to puncture a lip and chip a tooth. After he had thrown her out and they had separated, he had dedicated himself to his company, Sanita's Technologies. Many nights he did not even return to his home in the mountains and its memories. 2 weeks ago Judge Rita Sanders had stuck him with that enormous house and its enormous mortgage and expenses. The judge had awarded their liquid assets to Vicky. What was she going to do with $3 million in cash and securities, barbecued beans, and green salad with ranch dressing? "This is living," Ryan said. "Thanks for getting me away from that damn office." After 11 days without instant communications and the incessant chatter of the media, he had retired his supply of antacid to the back of his Jeep. Ryan Drake, CEO of Sanita's Technologies, was ready to examine some B6. He knew that he was reaching the end of his time at Sanitas. They had built it from nothing to a success. He had recently spoken to his friend O'Sullivan about his increasing reluctance to put up with the demands of investors who understood little or nothing about Sanitas's business. He took a sip of his second bourbon water and remembered his last day in the office. "This is unacceptable." Nick spit out the words as soon as he and Ryan were connected. "Everybody else will be here, as they promised." Ryan sighed as he pictured his youthful caller in his downtown Chicago office. Close-cropped hair, suit and tie. "Need you here," the youngster said. Nick had consummated his investment in Ryan's company 24 months ago. In the ensuing period, he had demonstrated his inexperience with investing in early-stage companies by voting against several budget items. They had subsequently proven to be worthwhile expenditures that had increased both revenues and profits. "Do you want the others to see what a really great job you've done?" Ryan interrupted the young man. "My company's ahead of plan, right? Revenues double last year. Profitable, correct?" Nick conceded. "On track for next year." Pizzazipoo. "Yes, but nothing. We're all we aren't." Which I said excess 31 trillion. Mark Kimmel. "Thank you. The best. My father doesn't wait for anybody. I'll be back in 2 weeks. How about Wednesday, the 30th? Deal. Check with my father. Let me know. Where are you going? What if I need to talk to you? There are no phones. I'll call when I get back." Ryan pushed the button that disconnected the call. He reached into his pocket, plopped another antacid tablet into his mouth, and thought how unnecessary the argument had been. All he wanted to do was take a little time away from the office. It would be different if things were not going well. Ryan walked next door to the threesome seated in the conference room, but did not sit. "I hope these are the final changes," he said to no one in particular. His tone was raw from the confrontation with Nick and the beating he had taken in divorce court earlier that day. He flashed his copy of the legal document the 32 paraded. Ryan reached into his pocket, retrieved a slim cylinder, and removed the top tablet. He slid it into his mouth and crunched the antacid. "All right, I agree. Things are going well," Nick said. "Have anything in your portfolio?" The CEO finished the young man's sentence for him. "But I need you in Chicago next Tuesday." The voice on the line struggled for control. Nick was accustomed to getting his way with company presidents. "My vacation begins tomorrow, period," Ryan said. Except for Nick, everyone had agreed to modify his or her schedule. "Coming to talk about Sanitas can wait until I get back," he said. Group was reviewing. Last night, after a full day in court with Judge Rita Sanders, he had given them his comments on it. Anything else? The document was the latest iteration of a revised agreement with TTT Instrumentation Corporation, their major foreign distributor. TTT accounted for 30% of their sales and provided service coverage internationally. Without such an arrangement, a company the size of Sanitas could not afford to sell outside the United States. The worldwide market for their products was 5 times the domestic. If they could not agree on new terms, Sanitas was facing a major setback. None of the CEO's key people offered anything further. "Well, okay, let's hope this does it. I'll set up the closing for right after I get back." Recovering from his telephone altercation, he smiled and added, "I appreciate all your hard work. He turned and walked to his office. Everything now hinged on that damn agreement. If DTT didn't sign it, Sanitas would have to retrench, lay off people, and he'd probably be looking for a new job. Plus he'd lose the $500,000 he'd invested, the $500,000 that his ex-wife's attorney had convinced Judge Sanders was now worth $10 million. And Hugh'd really be in bad shape. Now, in the gathering darkness of the desert, Ryan Drake gazed at the sprawled panorama of his surroundings, the wooded mesa to the west, the broad intervening valley. He inhaled the scent of sage and felt his body relax another notch. The problems of Sanitas could wait until he returned. Leaning back in his camp chair and looking up, he watched as the first stars appeared. Sparkling diamonds scattered across charcoal velvet. Hard to imagine they were so far away. Scientists measured their distances in light years. Earth's nearest neighbor, Proxima Centauri, was 4 light years distant. Trillions of miles away, 3 trillion. Mark Kimmel Ryan studied Ben's face in the flickering light from the campfire. The Navajo looked back at him and said, "Do you see that bright object?" He pointed overhead. Ryan looked up. A round light, much brighter than any star, scooted across the night sky. He could not tell how high it was. The object moved from northwest to southeast. On other ochre signs, Ryan had seen satellites, reflecting light from the recently set sun. This one appeared to be brighter than others, he recalled. "Sure, it's a satellite. Watch closely." Ben closed his eyes, almost as if it was responding to Ben's words. The bright object blinked once. Ryan could not take his eyes off it. He sensed it was something different, something not normally seen in the night sky. 34 As Ryan basked in the night sky, Ben built a campfire. Each of those eyes near the sun. Ryan pointed upward. It was one of those conversations that one had around a fire, wandering here and there, no real thread of continuity. Discussions such as this require downtime. I'm sure one of them must have intelligent life. Have you ever seen a UFO? That kind of stuff. My people have seen lights in the sky, Ben said. We do not talk about them. Ryan knew he was treading on his friendship with Ben when he asked, "Why not?" Ben took a long time to respond. Ryan could tell he was carefully weighing his answer. At last he said, "When the lights arrived in 1947, we reported them. White men came and said that my people were drunk and that the lights were only lightning and meteors. One of my cousins complained to the Navajo police and showed them a photo. He disappeared. Others have also disappeared for what they have seen, for what they know to be true." Without slowing, the bright object took a turn to the west. Again, without slowing, it turned north. In a few moments it halted. As Ryan watched, it slowly faded from sight. What was that? My people tell of visitors from beyond this world, long before the white man came to our land, Ben said and smiled. They taught my people many things. Ryan nodded that he had heard. He and Ben had debated the source of many of the Navajo's legends. The possibility of beings from an off-world civilization visiting his planet did not conflict with Ryan's view of this world, nor did it frighten him. The night air cooled. Ryan slipped on his jacket and warmed his hands over the flames. He looked over at Ben. The Navajo's eyes were closed, but Ryan could tell he was not sleeping because his head rested squarely on his shoulders. Ryan returned to studying the night sky. It was great to have time to think about things. He was glad he had accepted Ben's unexpected invitation. Although the blank sheet puzzled him, he did not feel at all insecure about it. He hoped that before he left the desert he would be able to sketch something of his future on his white tablet. "Hello." The campfire. The words, from beyond the fire's light, were clear but not loud. Who the hell was that? Startled, Ryan arose and peered in the direction of the voice. "Who's there?" he demanded. "It's Victor Adamson." "May we approach?" Ryan recognized the rumble of the tall man's voice. "Sure, come ahead," he said to the darkness. He sat his drink down next to his chair. Dr. Victor Adamson, Sarah Smith, and Peter Jones edged into the campfire's circle of light. The fourth person was an Navajo whom Ben acknowledged with a nod. All were dressed in dark 35 trillion. "Mark Kimmel, we are pleased that we found you awake," Dr. Adamson said. Sarah helped Peter to Ryan's chair and then seated herself on a nearby rock. Her movements were athletic, confident, but not sensual, more like a black panther settling onto its space. The older Navajo walked over and grabbed Ben by the arm. The two of them wandered off into the dark. The faint numbers on Ryan's Evo set read 9:12 p.m. He filled Ben's water pitcher from their tank and grabbed some paper cups. He returned to the group around the campfire and asked, "What brings you out at this time of the night?" "We have had to abandon Harmony," Dr. Adamson said. "Abandon in the morning? A contingent from the Immigration and Naturalization Service will invade it. They have already blocked the road to town and have people stationed along the highway. We decided that it was better not to be present when they arrived." Ben's crew was questioned. Ryan said, "What's going on?" "They believe we are harboring Mexican illegals." 36 West in garb and wide-brimmed hats. Each carried a backpack. Hiking boots had replaced their Western boots. They could have passed as a group of tourists with a native guide. "Good evening." Dr. Adamson approached Ryan and Ben. "We have hurried up the road and are a bit exhausted. May we trouble you for some water? This is Corded Saltsea, Ben's cousin." He indicated the Navajo, an older man dressed in black. "Would you like to sit?" Ryan indicated his camp chair and large rocks near the fire. Each of the people from Harmony carried a water bottle. Why did they need our water? Ben had towed a 150-gallon tank from town. "Did they bother to talk to you?" "The men you saw yesterday, they search everywhere," Sarah said. Her gentle voice was clouded with anxiety. "But they think we are lying. Let me give you some history." Dr. Adamson held up his hand. "After Harmony's completion, our first visitors were the Navajo. They came to learn agricultural techniques, use the library, and listen to our vision. Although we had submitted the necessary paperwork to them, the Bureau of Indian Affairs ignored our existence. 6 months ago, 2 BI agents made a brief visit and we showed them around, showed them everything. They made notes, took pictures. 3 weeks ago, 2 men showed up, unannounced. Luis Litchfield, from the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and Raul Viejo from the Immigration and Naturalization Service. They asked questions about our facility and our relations with the Navajos, Sarah said. "Last week, when I went into Kayenta, I was stopped by INS agent. He asked me for identification and questioned me. This morning, our Navajo gardeners and students were questioned as they turned into our side road," Dr. Adamson said. "This evening, vehicles and men gather at that intersection. We have done nothing wrong, but reason is not likely to prevail in these circumstances. Australian, we sense that we are being set up for an incident. I am sure you are aware of the deaths that occurred with government raids in Texas and Idaho. Tomorrow, rather than asking for an additional meeting to discuss things, the buyer ends up planning to take over our facility. In the aftermath of the terrorist attacks, federal agencies had been given more latitude to strike suspected locations. Initially, Mark Kimmel Ryan shook his head at the vision of armed men tearing through Harmony's spotless complex. "What about Amelia?" he asked. "She departed last evening," Sarah replied. Ryan turned to her. "I'm sorry. Everything seems to be happening at once. We would have left sooner." Sarah's words trailed off. "May I speak to you?" Alone, Dr. Adamson motioned Ryan to one side. They walked out of the light of the campfire and toward the road. As they walked, the white-haired man placed his arm around Ryan's shoulder. "Amelia has been sick for several months. She wanted to make her departure from Harmony well before this confrontation with the Imsand buyer. We had planned to resettle Peter and Sarah in a new location, but we waited. Let me help. I have connections." Ryan was convinced they had done nothing wrong. "We can go to the top levels of the Imsand buyer." His anger at the situation built. His jaw tightened. Fists clenched. He was surprised at his reaction on behalf of people he did not know that well. "We're headed into the desert," the white-haired man said it with finality. Ryan ignored Dr. Adamson's tone. "Do you know what you're doing?" He motioned to the surrounding terrain. This 38 Ryan had worried about the possible loss of freedoms, but he had not read of any unreasonable actions because of this new policy. "Hold on," he said. "What makes you think that we would do that?" Dr. Adamson said. "That is the information we have. We believe our sources are reliable. The INS does not want to create some kind of a standoff that could take weeks to resolve and bring unwanted public attention. The federal agencies consider this land to be under their guardianship and reason that they are freer to act here than if we were on someone's private property. Is the roughest part of the reservation dry, remote. The Navajos don't go out there without vehicles or horses. Hiking for any distance is near impossible. There's no nearby settlement. You've got to know what you're doing. From Bensdig, Kayenta was the nearest town, 20 miles northwest along AZ-59. To the northeast, on the other side of Fortress Mesa and 25 miles across a barren wasteland, was Mexican Water, a small trading post. Almost no one lived amid the rugged terrain to the south of the excavation. "I have lived here for many years," he said it in such a way that Ryan understood that Dr. Adamson had known this wilderness long before Harmony Center was built. "How far are you going?" Peter and Sarah are headed for Shipwreck. Shipwreck? That's 100 miles. Peter's in no condition. We have a friend with a car. After we cross Fortress Mesa, the Harmony leader motioned east to the formidable plateau. "You want to climb up there?" The mesa was silhouetted against the rising gibbous moon. The sandstone of the cliff was bad rock, too loose for technical climbing. During the past week, Ryan had considered scaling the sheer face, but dismissed the idea. One night Ben and he had heard a slab crumble from above. "Cody knows a route to the top." "Why?" "Why the authorities will have trouble tracking us there. Why not go around this much longer? Over the top ice only a few miles. Besides, once we are on top, There are trees to hide us. Come on, let me go with you to the inns. Ryan thought of his father, an attorney wired to many high-ranking Washington types. The last time Ryan had seen him, at his 80th birth, 39 trillion. Mark Kimmel, November, but there's no water. Say, how long do you think it'll take? Can I help? Ryan's mind buzzed. He'd read newspaper accounts of overreactions by law enforcement officers, the Los Angeles police and Rodney King, that he had killed a man in Denver by going to the wrong house. Sarah had been open with him, shown him every room at Harmony. Whatever Harmony was, he was sure they were not part of some scheme to hide Mexican illegals. Their facility was way too fancy. The idea was ridiculous. Smugglers did not have libraries or exercise rooms. Ryan felt this sense of adventure surface. He had seldom used it during the years he had concentrated on acting like a CEO. How about if I come along? Once we're on top, crossing the mesa shouldn't be too hard. He had a couple of days before he needed to be back in the office, and a good hike would be welcome. Ben wouldn't mind if left a day early. Maybe this would be part of reconnecting to his lost passion. Thank you, the white-haired man said. I had hoped you might join us. Can you leave now? They turned back toward the camp, and Dr. Adamson removed his arm. 40-day party. Dark-suited men had surrounded him. This is the way we will handle it. The words left no room for argument. You're going now? Tonight, Ryan asked. One day to cross the mesa, after we reach the top. Dr. Adamson replied. Peter walks slowly. An image flickered across Ryan's mind. A group of novices picking their way across an arid landscape. Except for Peter, they looked fit, but Sarah had admitted she was not an experienced outdoors person. Let me throw my things together, Ryan said as they re-entered the light from the campfire. Do you have food? We have plenty of caraway seeds, Sarah said, and grinned when he reacted. He started toward his jeep, but noticed Ben in heated conversation with Cordy. He walked to where they stood. Are you serious? Ben turned to Ryan. You're going into the desert with them? Ryan nodded once. You drive jeep to shipwreck? Cordy asked Ben. It was at the house the two men had been discussing this. Ben looked at Ryan and said, all right, I'll take care of your jeep, but you don't know what you're getting into. Hey, I'll know how it turns out. He gave his friend a light punch on the arm. Ryan rolled up his sleeping bag and air mattress and retrieved his pack from his jeep. He checked to be sure his hiking essentials were still there and stuffed in a few personal items, including a flashlight, supply of antacid, and change of clothes. The full pack weighed no more than 30 pounds. He grabbed his hat and an extra water bottle and headed back to the campfire. As an experienced hiker, Ryan always carried a pack in his jeep. With a little food and water, he could go off into the wilderness for a week or survive a vehicle breakdown on some back road. When he returned to the group, Dr. Adamson said, Ryan, may I suggest that you take the license plates off your vehicle? The white-haired man turned to Ben and said, replace Ryan's license plates with your own. In the confusion of the raid, Ryan's jeep will be taken for your vehicle and few questions will be asked. When you get his jeep to shipwreck, contact this number. He handed Ben a slip of paper. The person who answers will tell you where to deliver it. 4 trillion. Mark Kimmel. What about my truck? You're laughing. Ryan added, hey, let me know when you do another dig. He tossed Ben the keys to his jeep and hoisted his pack. Ben walked over to his cousin and whispered to him. Ryan could not make out the words, but he sensed that Ben was telling his cousin to look out for his friend. "Take care of my coffee maker," Ryan shouted over his scowled air as they moved out. He noticed that Ben was already carrying an armload of artifacts toward his jeep. Ryan and the threesome from Harmony walked to the road and followed Cordy southeast toward the old mine. The old Navajo's gray hair showed from beneath his broad-brimmed hat. Ryan could see little of his face except a weathered jaw and full lips that exposed jagged teeth. Two were capped in silver and caught a glint of moonlight when he spoke. He strode like a man who had spent many years in the open. He spoke to Ryan only once, cautioning him not to use his flashlight. 42 You probably should not return here for a few days, Dr. Adamson said. No one will question a dusty old truck parked in the sagebrush. Be sure to bring your plates back from shipwreck. Ryan slapped Ben's shoulder. Thank you, my friend, for everything. Taking career off me jeep. I live in Jiliak now. This seems a bit strange, but I feel like I'm back in the old days when we didn't do everything by the book. Maybe this is part of what I came here for. And don't let the inns hang any of this on you. It's my deal. If they give you trouble, give them my name and address. Okay. Ben looked as if he wanted to say more, to issue a further caution, but all that came out was, "Rye, are you sure you want to do this? No man is worth his salt who is not ready at all times to risk his body, to risk his well-being, to risk his life, in a great cause." Theodore Roosevelt. 3 Night on the High Desert was